Welcome. NSG 322. Study section 4. Selected theories of learning. Introduction. In this study section, I intend to introduce you to some selected theories of learning. There are many theories of learning that explain the concept of learning. I intend to discuss with you some of these theories and how they can help you to understand the concept of learning. Some of these theories include stimulus-response theory, theory of connectionism, and classical conditioning theory. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this section, you should be able to define theory of learning. State the purpose of theory of learning. Give examples of a theory of learning. Concepts of theory and learning theory. Let us take a look at the concept of theory and learning theory. A theory is defined as a supposition or a system of ideas intended to explain something, especially one based on general principles independent of the things to be. A set of principles on which the practice of an activity is based. A theory of education. Music theory. Learning theory is a model of psychology that explains human responses to the concept of learning. Learning theory includes behaviorism, cognitivism, and constructivism. Selected theories of learning. There are many theories of learning, but all these theories can be reduced to two schools of thought: behaviorism, cognitivism, constructivism. Behaviorism. Behavioral psychology is the psychological approach that focuses on learning new behavior and modifying existing one. In this theory, the learners observe the information, practice the information, and then receive reinforcement through praise. Examples are stimulus-response theories of learning, theories of connectionism. Stimulus-response theories of learning. Classical conditioning. Classical conditioning is the first most popular theory under the stimulus response. They are associated with IVAN, PAVLOV, 1849 to 1936. Pavlov's most famous experiments involved food, a dog, and a bell. Two other assumptions of this theory are that the environment shapes behavior and that taking internal mental states such as thoughts, feelings, and emotions into consideration is useless in explaining behavior. Classical conditioning is a learning process that occurs through associations between an environmental stimulus and a naturally occurring stimulus. It is the simplest form of learning. Pavlov experimented the classical conditioning on his dog. He taught his dog to salivate when a turning fork was struck by pairing the striking of the turning fork with presentation of milk powder to the mouth of the dog. After some time, the dog was salivating with hearing of the turning fork without the milk being presented. This is conditioning of the existing automatic response to occur when elicited by a signal not normally responsible for the action-reaction. The procedure of pairing the conditioned stimulus with unconditioned stimulus is called reinforcement, because any tendency for conditioned stimulus to appear is facilitated by reserve of unconditioned stimulus and the response to it. When the reinforcement unconditioned stimulus is discontinued, the unconditioned stimulus repeatedly, the conditioned response gradually diminishes, and the repetition of the conditioned stimulus continued reinforcement is called extinction. In the process of conditioning, the particular response ought to be evoked by a broad bind the specific conditioned stimulus. That is, a dog that has learned to salivate at the sound of a turning fork will also salivate to other similar sound, that is, of a bell, without further conditioning. The more nearly alike these means sounds, the more completely it will substitute for original sound. This is referred to as generalization. Pavlov experiment. Before conditioning, ringing the bell caused no response from the dog. Placing food in front of the dog initiated salivation. During conditioning, the bell was rung a few seconds before the dog was presented with food. After conditioning, the ringing of the bell alone produced salivation. Other observations by Pavlov. Stimulus generalization. Once the dog is learned to salivate at the sound of the bell, it will salivate at other similar sounds. Extinction. If you stop hearing the bell with the food, salivation will eventually cease in response to the bell. Spontaneous recovery. Extinguished responses can be recovered after an elapsed time, but will soon extinguish again if the dog is not presented with food. Discrimination. The dog could learn to discriminate between similar bells and discern which bell would result in the presentation of food and which would not. Higher order conditioning. Once the dog has been conditioned to associate the bell with food, another unconditioned stimulus such as lights may be flashed at the same time that the bell is rung. Eventually, the dog will salivate at the flash of the light without the sound of the bell. Operant conditioning. The proponent of this theory is B.F. Skinner, 1904 and 1990. Operant conditioning shares many principles of classical conditioning, but where chemical conditioning experiments deals with conditions that are inevitable or reflex. Operant conditioning deals with voluntary behavior. The term operant conditioning is sometimes called instrumental conditioning or behavior modification. Simply stated, operant derives from the fact that the learner must operate on the environment to produce an effect. Skinner designed a box with a bar in the box. The rat in a hungry state put in the box moves about when the rat comes in contact with the bar in the box. It stops in due to its pressure on the bar and causes some food to drop. The rat therefore associated its contact with the bar as a conditioning situation for food to drop. The food reinforces the behavior of bar pressing. In classical condition, the food is reduced or removed from the bar. The action rate of the rat pressing the bar will be diminished. Skinner regards reinforcement as something that can satisfy a basic drive or need. Therefore, operant conditioning can be defined as increasing the probability of a response in a particular stimulus environment by following the response with reinforcement. That is, if a desired behavior is reinforced by a verbal praise or other means, there is tendency for a repetition of the desired behavior. We can use this theory when we are trying to shape the behavior of a client in a clinical situation. We reinforce only those responses that are desirable and ignore the others. But one has to identify the desirable behavior and the factors surrounding various behaviors. Acquiring a specific behavior is the gradual progression shaping behavior in clinical settings, and it is common in psychiatric units. In operant conditioning, any act may be altered in the frequency in which it occurs by the consequences at the act. Skinner identified three types of responses or operands that can follow behavior. Neutral operands. Responses from the environment that neither increase nor decrease the probability of the behavior being repeated. Reinforcers. Responses from the environment that increase the probability of the behavior being repeated. Reinforcers can be either positive or negative. Punishers. Response from the environment that decrease the likelihood of the behavior being repeated. Punishment weakens behavior. Theory of connectionism. Another school of thought is E. L. Thorndike 1874 to 1949 theory of connectionism, propounded using the experiment of cat in the puzzle box. From this point of view, it says the basis of learning is the association between sense impressions and impulses to action. These impulses becomes responses. The association between sense impression and impulses to action is termed a connection or a bond. Sense impression is able to perceive certain situations and connect these with one's responses. Experiments of a hungry cat in the bus with several gadgets with the food outside the bus. It manipulates or operates the gadgets or lever pressing for the cat to escape from the bus and get to the food. Repetition of lever pressing. According to Thorndike, it is the connection between the sense impression and responses that become strengthened or weakened in making or breaking a habit. It stated further, the most characteristic form of learning in animals is trial and error. When man is confronted with a problem to reach a goal, he selects the course of action. When the appropriate course of action is selected, the goal is achieved. But whereby the learner could not get any appropriate course, it results to trial and error. Thorndike describes trial as the length of time or no of errors involved in a single attempt at reaching the goal. It propounded 3 laws of learning. Law of readiness is that of preparatory adjustment to learning situation. The learners must be ready in a situation which he has been aroused and is interested in what is not be taught. This is not a law about growth, but in education, there is this concept of readiness. Thorndike's readiness is not maturational readiness. The essence is for the learner to be predisposed to the learning situation, and learning has made easier and result is pleasant. The law of exercise. According to this law, the more the number of times a response is connected to a stimulus, the longer it will be retained. Exercise or repetition strengthens the connection between stimulus and response. The corollary to this is that when practices or exercise is discontinued, there is weakening of the bond between stimulus and response. If a skill is learnt but do not put into practice in time, ability to utilize it effectively is remote or reduced. The principle of practice is derived from this law. The law of effect simply states that the connection between a stimulus and response is strengthened or weakened as a result of the consequence for effect. This law is said to be the most influential of the learning theories. As earlier said, success and reward and their effects on learning, then failure and punishment and their effects on learning. If there is stimulus followed by response and response followed by a reward, or may be followed by an annoyance whichever, cognitivism. Cognitivism is a theory which attempts to answer how and why people learn by attributing the process to cognitive activity. 2 key assumptions underlie this cognitive approach. 1. That the memory system is an active organized processor of information, and 2. That the pro-knowledge plays an important role in learning. Cognitive theory looks beyond behavior to explain brain-based learning. Examples are Gestalt or field theory by Wolfgang Kohler. Gagnon, 1974, developed information processing theory which identified 8 levels of intellectual skills, including signal, stimulus response, training, verbal association, multiple discrimination, concept formation, principle formation, and problem solving. Gestalt or field theory by Wolfgang Kohler. Gestalt or field theorist. This theory has its salient feature that views man in his environment as a unit, participating in a simultaneous interaction. They are of the view that things and people are perceived differently by different individuals because their perception depends on sum total of their life experiences and how they perceive other things in their life space. This school maintains that learning is matter of understanding relationship within a total field learning situation. The proponents of this school are German psychologists. This theory started in 1912 by a German Maswet Einer 1912, Kurt Kofika 1924, W. Kohler 1925. Later, Kurt Kofter followed and wrote a book. W. Kohler wrote a book which started with mentality or apes. His experiment is widely acclaimed in the field of Gestalt theory. The emphasis is on perception. When you can perceive properly and interpret correctly, it is then learning can be effective. Kohler's experiment on apes, 2 different experiments, box experiment, stick experiment. In this box experiment, a box was built. With this box, Kohler had some banana hung up. Box and banana available in cage. You can only get the banana by first getting the box. Only one chimpanzee was able to reach the banana by making connection between the box and the banana. Other chimpanzees saw this and copied and were able to make connection between box and banana to get the banana. Other box experiments. Having two short boxes, the chimpanzee has to see the relationship between the box and the banana by putting one on the other in order to reach the banana continue falling down. Another modification of the experiment is by putting the chimpanzee inside the cage, the banana outside the cage with a stick in between. The chimpanzee had to use this stick to draw the banana nearer the cage to get hold of the banana. Each chimpanzee tried one at a time, making records of which could make the connection, later group them together. Then two shorter sticks used instead of a long one. The chimpanzee had to join the two sticks together and use it to draw the banana nearer to the cage to catch the banana. The whole idea is to test the insight or understanding to situations. The organism learning has to utilize the best method. When such situation happens in future, insightfulness would be practiced. In clinical setting, we utilize the two approaches. 1. That learning is a cognitive process. 2. That learning is an associative process, eclectic approach, but the situation will suggest which approach to utilize, that is, the topic to be taught and the characteristics of the learners to be considered. Gagnon Information Processing Theory. Gagnon 1974 developed information processing theory, which identified 8 levels of intellectual skills including signal, stimulus response, chaining, verbal association, multiple discrimination, concept information, principle information, and problem solving. Gagnon 1974 developed information processing theory, which identified 8 levels of intellectual skills, namely signal learning, a general response to a signal like a dog responding to a command; stimulus response learning, a precise response to a distinct stimulus, e.g. to a reward or reinforcement; chaining, psychomotor connection learning, a chain of 2 or more stimulus response connection is acquired, e.g. writing, running, catching, and throwing a ball; verbal association, the learning of chains that are verbal, e.g. remembering poems or formula in sequence; discrimination learning, the ability to make different responses to similar appearing stimuli, e.g. recognizing the needs of children in class. In this case, the teacher connects each child with his individual appearance. Concept learning, a common response to a class of stimuli. Principle or ruling learning, learning a chain of 2 or more concepts, e.g. identifying the numbers of legs to classify invertebrate animals. Problem solving, a kind of learning that requires thinking, e.g. experimenting to test the effects of different types of fertilization on plant growth. Skills are to be learned at the lowest level and mastered before proceeding. An instructor should use positive reinforcement and repetition, with each new skill building upon previously acquired skills. Study section summary. In this study section, you have learned that theories are set of rules on which a practical subject or skill is based. They are intended to explain certain concepts. There are many theories that explain the concept of learning. Examples of such theories include stimulus response theory. We've come to the end of study section 4. Thank you.